Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I'm on part 7 of the introduction to Mirror of Simple Souls by Marguerite Porete. I forgot my general warnings in the last one that I made about Nietzsche. Whoopsie daisy. Just copy and paste this one if you happen to like watching both of these, though they're different subjects entirely. I cuss when I rant, and probably just in general. And if you don't like cussing, you don't have to watch this. Where we left off in the introduction. Oh, right. Also, sorry. The reason I am reading the introduction after 30 chapters in is because I was Czech, so I'm double checking myself, and now I feel dedicated to reading the rest of it. And I do, in fact, feel forced to read it by myself. So, that is the reason for it. Where we left off is the editor, Ellen Babinski, was being nonsensical herself in an attempt to structure Marguerite's sentiment. And if you want to go back and figure out my insults for that nonsense, then you are welcome to do so in what was part 6. As this is part 7, and I hope I actually said that correctly initially. So, starting off, Marguerite uses 3 different terms that describe 3 kinds of knowledge of which the intellect of the soul is capable. In the world of created beings, the intellect is able to know Savior, and savoir, because it was interpreted from French. And that is something else that the editor, and maybe Marguerite did it for some things, but the editor has been putting in parentheses behind certain things. Either the initial word for it, but then there was also something recently where she put in parentheses the names Benjamin and Rachel to describe, I think, like fine love or something, and something else. So I'm not perfectly in understanding of what the hell she means by these parenthetical words. And that's where I stand. In the world of created beings, the intellect is able to know about the world of things. Okay. I mean, that's observation. And to perceive or grasp their meanings by means of reasoning activity. Is that understanding? Is reasoning understanding? Finding a reason for something? I don't think you necessarily need to find reason for something or reason something out in order for it to have understanding. I think that's like a really good basis for it. But I think something can have understanding in it being unknown as well. Like we understand, what is it? Black matter and white matter exist, or is that called dark matter? And white matter exist, but we don't necessarily understand why they exist. That does not initially take away from the understanding that it does, in fact, exist. So I don't think understanding is had by reasoning. I do think understanding is had by observation. And reasoning helps one contemplate what one has observed, but that is not... that's a part of understanding, but it is not the entirety of understanding. To understand and quote-unquote understanding, however, seem for Marguerite to be technical terms referring to things pertaining to the divine realm. The terms connaître and connaissance refer both to mental content and mental capacity. I mean, far be it from me to know French, but cognizance? God damn, I am so sorry. Just looks like cognizance. So, is it really mental capacity? or what you're cognitive of. And isn't being cognitive of something just having knowledge of something, and that's not necessarily your mental capacity. As demonstrated by Marguerite's description of the sad soul. Right, there was this whole description of like the sad and the lost soul, and these are the two souls that help you understand the 3 stages of death, or the 3 types of death. Then these 2 types of souls are going to be the most likely to go through one of these types of deaths to reach the closest position of God and then receive what God says in God's court. And everybody else is a peasant in their belief. However, like I said prior, the 3 types of death are just death. It's not a different type of death. It's just a different situation where death exists. And dying to yourself to become a meat puppet for God does not make you perfect. It just exemplifies that God is perfect by your standards. You, however, have stopped existing. So I don't agree that makes you perfect. And that is why that sad soul is mentioned there. Marguerite states that the sad soul understands that she lacks the understanding, which comes from the divine life, something that the lost soul does not understand. And so the sad soul is better than the lost soul. But the lost soul has an easier time than the sad soul. Ignorance is bliss. The first use, the verb, would appear to indicate the content. What is understood, namely, that the capacity is lacking. Your capacity is lacking, sorry. The second use, the noun, would appear to indicate the capacity that the sad soul lacks. Okay. However, the fact that the soul understands that she lacks the capacity paradoxically gives to the soul a kind of capacity. No, it doesn't. Just because I know that there's a shit ton of information that I do not know, it does not provide me with that information that I do not know. I am just capable of understanding I don't know. Again, with like the constant, back and forth of trying to provide for the ego that has been destroyed and then perfectly kicking it by attempting humility, one in succession right after the other. Like a sad act of attempting balance, which is really fucking killing your psychology. An understanding which contributes to spiritual progress. No, it doesn't. Thus, divine love calls the sad souls wise. But wisdom is bad, because according to Marguerite Porete, wisdom is born from worldly intellect. And therein you should not trust it or use it. The lost soul lacks content and therefore the capacity as well. In the 6th stage, both the capacity of the understanding in the sad soul and the content of what is understood are transformed and subsumed by divine knowing, which Marguerite also calls understanding. I mean, 1300. I sit here, fucking 1,000 years later, just about 900 years later, insulting the fuck out of a woman from 1300 for not knowing proper definition and having not necessarily the best psychology, and really just making an ass out of myself, because hindsight is 2020 and I am at a time, luckily, where women are not shit on for having been given education. I mean, modern time is looking kind of bleak, where I'm not saying, people who don't want to be, or people who want to be homemakers. I myself stay the fuck at home. I'm an introvert and I suffer from my life experiences. So I really enjoy staying at home. However, I am not a happy homemaker type, even if I attempt to contribute. I also expect contribution. And I think that is, if it is a relationship, then my personal belief, polyamory or not, if you're getting into a relationship, the attempt is to make life easier for the both of you as well, the added benefit of love and liking someone. But I think it is very important to understand that in a relationship, it is a working mechanism more than it is just an emotional reality. And to help that working mechanism, both contribute what they have the ability to. So I don't think that's down to a gender war. I don't think it's an identity of the person that is generally applied societally, but rather a personal understanding of who they are and what they can give. So I don't personally subscribe to the idea that women are happiest in the kitchen. I've known a great many men who are cooks and do far better than myself, and a great many women. And follow a good amount of creators online who, are happy to share their my brain just wanted to say kitchen mayhem, who happen to be men. And that is not denying women in their cookery. Or women who like cars. I don't think it has fucking anything to do with how you ascribe your gender identity or understand life. I just think it's a personal fucking choice. I don't know why I'm going on this rant. Oh, right, because current phenomena would have it that conservatism is on the rise. Side rant. Everybody is very wary that conservatism is on the rise and that women are slipping back into, that took women back 50 steps. Conservatism goes on the rise when the economy crashes. That is an absolute correlation, not necessarily a causation. My belief is that it is very nefarious. Because if you go back to vaudeville, theaters, and essentially like the birth of Hollywood, during that economic crash, decline, and the Dust Bowl, it was after or during the war, everyone had to ration for war as well. It was generally accepted. There are several articles you can go back and find. I read a magazine article about it. To have children that you knew were not going to make it into adulthood to gain profit from. Either they were work hands to help you with whatever your work was, mostly on the farm, or they were sold to industry. There was an article written about a little girl that was sold to the Coca-Cola company, and it was not so much like sold, but it was under contract to be flown out to do advertisements, like paint the advertisement. And it was a very weird article where she was like kind of rented out for parties to swing. Not like swing relationship wise, but there was a literal swing decorated with flowers and she would swing. So like vaudeville also was a theater act, and yeah, there were adults on it, but it definitely promoted child labor. And I think conservatism goes on the rise when the economy declines because, generally speaking, society does better economically by relying, U.S. society does better economically when they rely on illegalities, especially when the economy declines. And you can only rely on illegalities if the forefront is legal. So it's easier to hide behind conservatism if in reality you are doing something really fucked up. Like, let's get into that. The U.S. pageants that Erica was running were known for dealing with very underage girls. And if you wanted to look into how that affects these girls, you can in your own time. Let's just reference, that lawyers can't try Maxwell because, in my understanding, she's the daughter of an Israeli spy. So that would make her an asset. Not because she wasn't a pimp of young girls. Conservatism is on the rise because society is on the decline. And it isn't for what people are yelling about. Like in Florida, is sin tax, not syntax, but sin tax is being proposed by someone running for a position in government, where I think they said 50% is going to be taxed for OF workers, which, I do think, if you have a job, pay taxes, but I also believe that these taxes were supposed to be a socialist program, and instead we're paying, what was it, $3 trillion to support Israel's war. So, how useful are those taxes to the U.S.? Really? I'm not sure. Anyways, passing the anti-abortion bills would not necessarily take abortion off the table. It would just make people go to, less safe means to procure one. Same with incredibly taxing, putting a heavy taxation on OnlyFans. Florida is pretty fucking known for trafficking and sex trafficking and the incredible party atmosphere that they have. And you think taxing OnlyFans is going to help your conservative viewpoint? It's just going to make people find physical prostitution more viable, and it makes me think that that's the point. Because OnlyFans, you can't touch them. They are safer. If you really gave a shit about people, you'd give a shit about people. So, I have ranted a good amount. I've lost where I started. Oh yeah, women getting education. Conservatism. Wanting women in the kitchen. It's a good way of not expecting yourself to grow. Not saying like you're going to grow by suddenly being a cook. But if you expect other people to stunt their growth, you likewise are not forced to grow yourself. Also, if you want a 1950s wife, 1950s women were psychologically experimented on with the beginning of Xanax and such pills. You really want to understand America and you want to go back in history, you should pay attention to how the US has historically treated drugs and the relationship that drugs have had societally. Because US has never been without drugs. And a 1950s housewife was doped the fuck up on a lot of prescription drugs. Normally. Some weren't, but a lot were considered too neurotic to maintain. So going back to Marguerite. This dynamic of transformation will receive full attention below. All three kinds of knowledge, savoir, entendre, and connaître, depend upon the object of the will, which governs the intellect generated by ability. In the beginning structure of the movement towards perfection, ability, intellect, and will, while differentiated, work very closely together. Wouldn't you say in, you would hope, rather, in anybody's structure of the movement towards perfection, their ability to do so, their intellect, their ability to perceive, and their want to do so would work closely together? I don't think that should be significant only to the beginning. And again, is this instructing us of general beginnings, or are they meaning to apply the begin as another descriptor for Marguerite? In the fifth stage, the will must, quote, depart its own will, unquote, and, quote, render itself back to God, unquote. Although that's just death. Although free will has been placed in the soul by the goodness of God. Was it the goodness or the test? Because it seemed to be the test in that you should try to relinquish yourself of free will after having it. So it doesn't seem to be the goodness of God, but the testing of God that you might give up your free will. With the power of the free will, the soul freely removed her will from the will of God. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Having removed the will from God, who properly possesses free will, the soul separated herself from God. Okay, so it's not good. Willing independently from the divine will. To will the divine will is the proper activity of the human will. Okay. To will independently of the divine will is what constitutes the separation of humanity from God. Wait. Okay, yeah, so it was the soul. So the soul is separated from humanity. I wonder if, the study of demonology ever gets into a soulless human versus a human occupied by something other than the initial soul rendered. Christianity often goes into possession or oppression. But does it ever, account for someone who has chosen to not exist while simultaneously continuing to live? To will independently of God is even to steal the will from God. Wow, you're very powerful. Who is the proper locus? Okay, it's L-O-C-U-S. And I'm used to the bug being L-O-C-U-S-T. So, I don't know. Of the human will. The removal of the will from the divine will does not therefore render the will unfree, however. Okie dokie. For Marguerite, as for Augustine, Bernard, and their successors, who are these people, the will is still free either to wander into perdition or through grace to replace itself where it belongs in the divine will. That means giving up. So again, I don't think free will was provided through the goodness of God, but through the testing of God to see what you would choose to do with it. Alright. I'm going to stop there because I think I ranted way too much, and I'm only slightly sorry for that. Okay, have fun, eat well, sleep well, drink well, bye.